Hi there, and welcome back to another episode at Station Road. Now today I thought I'd squeeze in one last episode for 2023. Today, of course, being New Year's Eve. So today's video is two components to it. Firstly, a look at what I've been working on the layout, and then finally just a quick review of this year on the Station Road channel. So first up, we'll take a look at what I've been working on the layout, and this is of course a continuation of where I've been working on the extension to the depot area and slowly but surely progressing towards where this abandoned viaduct is going to be. Now we still haven't got to that point yet, but there was some further additional infrastructure components relating to where this tunnel mouth is going to be that I've started to work on. So we'll flick over to that now and see what I got up to. So as I mentioned in some of the previous episodes in this series, of course I changed my mind about where this tunnel portal was going to be on this mainline curve, and originally it was going to be back here, the viaduct coming over, and then a sort of a kind of a bit of a weird space in here. Now, as you know, I changed my mind to push this tunnel further around and then of course create more of a hillside here as if it was a valley going down that way. So I've jumped ahead a little bit, as you can see, and actually created this unit or box shape here that's once again engineered to fit the shape of this area. So in its own right, it's quite a peculiar construction, but quite sturdy. So I've made this out of 6mm, 6mm MDF with various sort of supporting structures inside, and as you can see I've started to apply a bit of brickwork. Now I'm actually going on the basis of this tunnel portal that I sort of discovered in, I believe it's in Birmingham, and it of course uses the blue brick or engineer's brick, and I thought I'd actually stick with that concept of an engineer or blue brick. I don't think, well, as far as I can see, there is no real blue brick on this layout, so I sort of thought it would actually make quite a nice contrast. So the idea is that this is going to be a lift out section once again, so the whole thing pops out. Now this means that I can gain access to this track work for any kind of heavy duty cleaning. So as you can see, the construction of it is quite bespoke, as with a lot of components on this layout. So it's sort of kind of made up of like box sections, and we've got two sort of box sections here, one here and one here, which of course is cut with MDF to the curve of the track. And then once I've done that and that's set, then I've clamped in some more MDF. This one's card and this one is MDF to wrap around and create this curve that gives me these inside shapes, which of course I've lined with the blue brick. So it gives me a decent amount of the internal tunnel structure, so that from a visual standpoint it will appear that the tunnel carries on. So as you can see, there's these strange bits here, and it's all designed to fit within the current substructure around this part of the layout. So as you can see, this just slots into here, and I've made some markings on here so I know where it's being positioned. I will at some point create some brackets through here that will actually allow it to butt up to those components. So this is that component. Then I've also created this piece here. Now these are made up of two separate components. So we have this sort of buttress, and this is, once again, this is based on that tunnel mouth that I've been using as a resource, and it appeared to sort of have a sloped short embankment, and then there was like another supporting buttress that I would assume would be structural to hold up the hillside. And once again, it's got a protruding piece. It's all quite bespoke in a lot of ways, and once again this is actually made up in a sort of a box type construction. Most of this is 3mm MDF. There's a little bit of 5mm in here for the vertical structures, and once again I've wrapped this with the blue brick. This is going to slot into here, and once I've got the position of this absolutely bang on, I'll actually glue this buttress to the sloping embankment. This is just temporarily clamped here at the moment so that it stays together. So that's that component. And then what I've done, and this is actually of course using my laser cutter, so we have our tunnel mouth piece, and of course once again what I've done is applied the blue brick and of course wrapped it around the edges, so you can actually see it's wrapped around there. And of course there's a little bit of a recess where there's a kind of a bit of an architectural feature, of course, on top of that tunnel portal. So this component slots into here, and once I get this all sort of lined up and positioned, which we'll do in this video, I will glue this in place. And then of course now you can see where the brick that I'd applied to this main structure shows through and gives us that sort of recessed architectural feature. So once that's on, then we've got some vertical buttresses that are going to be installed here, and once again these will be glued on. So there's a component there, and that's probably not going to stay there. No, it's not. So that'll be glued into place in that position there. And then of course we've got our other buttress at this end, which is going to squeeze in between these two components here, and of course that's going to be glued in. Now this piece here, that is of course going to be the beginning of some hillside, so the hillside's sort of going to come up from this area here. We're also going to have an embankment or hillside coming up just on this edge, so we're only just going to see a smidgen of this around here, and of course it will join up with this component over here and run around and come up here. Because the top of this piece here, as you can imagine, the viaduct's going to come through the back of here. It's going to be about this much higher, and so this is all going to be sloping hillside up on top of this platform. So another component that I've made up, and this is just some smaller arches, once again out of the blue brick, and of course wrapped around the back, and that's actually slotting in around this corner here. So we're going to have a little bit more of an interesting kind of retaining wall around the back here, and that sort of ties in actually with what appears to be the inside of the tunnel. On the prototype has some arches on the inside wall. So once that's slotted into place, and then this is going to go over the top, then you've got a sort of a nice sort of tidy corner here. Now I am going to put in a buttress coming down here in some form, so this will actually be quite a solid chunky buttress, because I'd imagine from a engineering point of view it would probably need that in real life. And then of course around here we're going to continue on a little bit of landform, so there'll be a bit of sloping hillside coming around here. I possibly might put in a bit of a wall coming down here, as if this has been cut into the hillside, and we might have a little bit of raised landform just across this bit here, so it eliminates all these sort of hard edges that we have here at the moment. And of course there'll be a retaining wall running along this edge here up to where the coal stage is. So the final touch of course is some little wee laser cut bits of card, which have also got the blue brick on them, and of course they're going to run across here. So these are a little bit of an architectural feature, and they're cut out sections. So in this process here what I did is actually applied the blue brick to the card first and then popped it through the laser cutter. So you ended up with, you know, the dark edges, the burnt dark edges of the laser cutter, but you have the nice brickwork on the face of it. So these components are actually going to go across here, and then of course there'll be a little bit of a lintel or capping stone across the top as well, and then of course capping stones across the top of here. So that's where this component is at the moment, and the reason why I started on this bit here is because I kind of feel like I need to work my way backwards towards the viaduct. So it would be kind of silly, I felt, for me to build this viaduct, construct it, and then find that it's not going to work in with what needs to be done here. So it's kind of a little bit like reverse engineering. So now that I've got this shape where it is and where the viaduct is going to run through, and of course what I've done is I've reduced the width of the viaduct that's actually going to run through here. So of course my lovely improvised cardboard viaduct actually doesn't fit in here any longer because this was too wide and I couldn't be bothered trimming it down. So the viaduct is now going to run through this component here, and then of course around the back underneath here I'll continue possibly just with some black card or something like that to block out the light so that we get a truly dark inside to the tunnel mouth. So we'll get on and I'll finish off gluing these components on, at which point you'll be able to take a closer look at how these components were obviously made and also how all of this is going to come together, and then I can actually work out where these two components are clamped in the right place so that I can glue them together, and then I could probably actually form a piece of polystyrene which is going to create this hillside component coming up here, because I kind of want it to meet up with the top edge of that so that it's almost on this kind of angle, maybe sort of kind of like that. So it's going to be a bit of an unusual angle so that it carries actually on through this area here. So I think the plan is to attach all these components while this base structure is actually in place, because I kind of feel if I take this away and attach all these components when it's not actually in its final position, that I'm going to glue them in the wrong place, and then when I return it back here it's not going to fit correctly. So it's a little bit tricky probably doing it this way, but I just really want to make sure that this whole unit fits nice and snugly into its respective position. So we'll start by gluing this fascia on here, and I'll be able to clamp it just in a few places so that it's exactly where it needs to be, and then I can lift the whole unit off and clamp the rest of it down and let that set. So for this I'm just going to use some PVA glue, the white wood glue. Some of these smaller components I will probably use some of the rocket card glue because it dries a lot quicker, it's a little bit easier to control, and I think particularly for these lintels that run through here and these components that run up and down here, I don't need to wait for them to dry. Once they're on, they're pretty much anchored in place. So we'll get on and do this component first and see how we go. So that's where we're at with this particular area of the layout, and I do feel actually I made the right decision to bring that tunnel mouth forward, and also to actually do a blue brick composition rather than red or stonework, and I certainly think it looks the part in this particular area. So I add a little bit of landform above where that sloped retaining wall is. We did that off camera, and that is now working in roughly sort of how I want it to look. I haven't run the hill slope right up to the top edge because I need to factor in maybe a bit of overgrowth and shrubs and so forth that are actually going to pile up in that corner, and hence that part of the tunnel area will disappear even further. But you can get the idea of how the hill form will continue on up above the tunnel entrance. So you would have seen during that clip I made reference to a tunnel in Birmingham, and this is the Jewellery Quarter station. Now it's a very short wee tunnel, but it was interesting the fact that this tunnel straddled 4 tracks, which I think is reasonably rare. But I took that tunnel as my starting point, and I managed to find a few photos that showed the tunnel from various different angles, and then of course from that I was able to draw up a design on the computer and of course load in some brickwork. Now the brickwork that I've actually used is taken from some photos that I took locally of some rather large empty brick walls around Christchurch, and of course then using Photoshop I toned them and manipulated the colours obviously to turn them into a blue brick, engineer brick colour from what they originally were red. So once that brick texture was added into the software, and then of course designed up the portals and also the additional components, then it was a case of separating the print work and the cutting work out separately, from which I could laser cut out on the MDF, then layer up of course the printed components, and as was mentioned, wrap them around the edges. So I think with this tunnel portal component now in place, and that's all been mapped out and worked out, I think the next step is I can actually get on to start designing or continue designing the viaduct, and then actually start producing some of the components and doing the assembly. So I think that's going to be quite an extensive project in itself, which of course will start off in the new year. So speaking of New Year's, I thought I'd do a little bit of a nostalgia trip and go back over the last year 2023 and what I covered on the Station Road channel, and it was kind of interesting really. In total 38 videos were produced, which to me doesn't seem like a lot, but I guess there's a reasonable amount of content there. And then when I sort of delved deeper in and I looked at, right, what did I actually cover throughout the year, and I would actually have to say the biggest chunk of this last year of 2023 all centered around the raising of that goods yard. And that meant quite a bit of remodelling of that entire area, and of course that was all to do with train clearances with a line that runs directly underneath there. So there was the coal merchants yard, there was the goods yard, and then there was actually remodelling and rebuilding the entire hillside, and then redoing the water reservoir up on top. So that of course is still an ongoing project, and there's still a lot to do there, but I kind of feel like the main focus really was the coal merchants yard and the goods yard, which is very much near complete, and it's looking good, and I'm quite happy with the results so far. So some other topics that came up during the year was a wee dabble into Hornby's HM7000 TSX decoders and looking at the Bluetooth app. So there was a number of videos in there. Then also there was some videos in there, of course, relating to the Sandling Junction layout, which is run by Paul, and then of course that kind of tied in to, of course, the UK trip as well, which was to attend the Getz Model Railway exhibition in Milton Keynes. and then of course work on Paul's layout in the flesh down in Kent. So that was probably a big highlight of this year, particularly for me. Not sure whether it was for you, but I certainly thoroughly enjoyed that trip. And then finally, really to sort of top off towards the end of the year, of course, it was actually getting into this extension to the depot area, the abandoned viaduct, and basically that whole wing of the layout, and actually getting on with it and starting to make some progress in that area. So I guess in a way actually a lot has actually been covered in this year. I've certainly come to the conclusion I'm not a speed modeler. I do take my time. I do feel I'm quite methodical in the process, and really at the end of the day there's no rush, there's no hurry. This layout might keep me going into my old age. So I guess with 2023 nearly behind us, and of course 2024 only a few hours away for me, there's certainly some interesting projects that are going to be coming up on the channel next year. And of course, as I mentioned, I think first off the list, of course, is going to be this viaduct. So I think that's me done for 2023. And I certainly hope you've enjoyed this year's content and got some really good inspiration and ideas, techniques and so forth from what I've been putting up on the Station Road channel. So with that all said, I shall sign off for now, wishing you all a very, very happy new year. Do take care, look after yourselves. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time. Bye for now.